Welcome to the Rooted Intentionally YouTube channel. I'm Susan Carson, and I'm here today with Bette Dickinson, and we're brand new friends, just kind of meeting
Brand new.
here. And I'm so excited to talk today. You have a relatively brand new book, just came out in the fall, The Art of Vinemaking, Spiritual Flourishing and a Productivity-Driven Culture. And I'll just say you're speaking my language already.
Hmm.
I started reading your book, and it's speaking to me deeply as a person who has sort of organized a lot of what I think about life and God around John 15 and
hmm
vines and branches and living rooted. So I'd love it if you take a minute and just maybe introduce yourself to folks. What would you like them to know about you? And then I just love to hear what led you to your journey in the vineyard.
Yeah. So my name is Bette Dickinson. I am an artist, writer. I create resources and experiences for people to encounter God. And I love to do that through my art and writing and speaking and retreat
Mm.
leading. And I
Mm.
love the work of spiritual formation and discerning sort of how are we formed, which, John 15 is such a pivotal passage when it comes
Mm.
to that in our relationship with God and who are we
Mm.
becoming. And I started this journey about 6 years ago when I was working on a painting commission and a little written devotional commission on John 15.
Mm.
And I was fascinated by this idea. And I live in Traverse City, Michigan, which is a place that actually is a growing wine region. Many people don't know that, but Traverse City is a growing wine region. And I thought, if I am going to do this painting and written devotional on John 15, I would really love to actually talk to an actual vine dresser and talk about, their vantage point on what do vine dressers do? How do they cultivate vines? How do they grow and bear fruit? And so I was fortunate to meet with a friend who's now a dear friend, Dave Boss. The first time I met with
Mm.
him, he is an organic farmer, a vine farmer, and had tended vines in Napa Valley, California. And when I met with him, I was just really curious, what do vine dressers pay attention to when tending vines and trying to understand in Jesus's world, it was a very agrarian society. And so the people he was talking to, he didn't need to give a lot of interpretation around what he meant because people already understood what he meant with vines, but we don't. There's a
Sure.
very large gap between us and vines. And so he
Yeah.
had said, good vine dressers, they actually don't pay much attention to the fruit. They pay attention to the health, the quality, and the vitality of the vine. And if you pay
Mm.
attention to those things, then fruit will be the natural byproduct, like quality fruit. And I was like, what? What?
Mm.
Because I don't know about you, Susan, but in our world, I mean, we tend to pay a lot of attention to the fruit, right? Sort of these external signs and external metrics of growth and success.
Yes.
And it was just fascinating to learn that actually vine dressing is more about the process that leads up to the fruit than just the fruit itself. And that there's this
Mm.
relational responsiveness between the vine dresser and the vine. There's this
Mm.
deep work of cultivation that happens over many different seasons leading up to
Mm.
harvest, and that harvest is actually only a few short weeks. But as I, met with Dave that time, I really felt like I need to learn more, and so it kind of led me on this 6 year journey of following
Wow.
the vine through every season, learning from Dave in terms of how he cultivates vines that really reshaped the way I view the spiritual life and also reshaped the way I view God because I think, for
Mm.
a long time, I had this vantage point that God was like this boss that's just putting the squeeze on us for more grapes, that just wants
Yes.
more from us. And
Yes.
instead, I was able to see through Dave's perspective how deeply he cares for his vines and is after their
Mm.
long term flourishing. And that even some years will remove fruit from the vine so that it can focus on growing and healing and growing deep roots and uh, flourishing. So that's kind of
Mm.
what led me on the journey. that then I, wrote the book out of a response to the things I was learning and just felt like other people need to know this. And
Mm,
so,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And it really does get to the deepest questions about who is God and then who are we and what are we here for.
Mm-hmm.
I know I used to, in days gone by, I would have read John 15 and the whole act of pruning as almost this violence, sort of,
Yeah.
versus a loving, tending. Um, so I'd love to hear more about you talk about the journey from false self to true self and
Mm-hmm.
how this shifted your story and how this
Mm-hmm.
shifted your relationship with God.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I was realizing how much when I met with Dave and heard his perspective on vines, I was beginning to realize how much I had been shaped by this productivity driven approach and worldview to life, which was all about the results in my life, all about the metrics of success. And
Yeah.
I mean, even in the ministry world I was living in, my performance review was directly related to how many people were in the
Mm,
ministry, how
yeah.
many people were coming to Jesus, how many small groups we had, which is not uncommon, right, for a lot of
Right.
ministry leaders to be
For sure.
evaluated by those things.
For sure.
And I realized how much it had created this drive in me for those things, that was my aim, as opposed to trusting that if I focus on abiding, if I focus on cultivating health in my relationship with Jesus, if I surrender to God's tending of me that is for my flourishing, it will yield
Mm,
quality fruit. And that's the promise in John 15, right? Jesus says,
yeah.
abide in me and you will yield quality fruit. But I think the
Yes.
false self shows up when the fruit becomes our aim as the thing, as opposed to this
Mm,
overflow. And I was just starting a sabbatical at the time that I
mm,
had these initial conversations with Dave. And during this sabbatical, it really took a lot of uncovering, oh, all of these things that I've been doing in ministry, I've been doing to win
mm,
approval from other people. Like I've been
mm,
trying to sort of shape shift to be whatever version of success that was asked of me, whatever people wanted me to produce, the fruit that they were looking for. And in my sabbatical, I began to realize that these were expressions of the false self, and that actually my truest self is an artist. The truest, most
mm,
authentic part of who I am is the part that I find deepest intimacy with God when I'm painting, when I'm creating,
mm,
and that all the other stuff, all the ministry needed to overflow from that place.
mm,
But because I was always striving for these sort of metrics of success or these things that I felt like I needed to do, the art always came last.
mm,
And I had this picture of just like, if you've seen the Disney's Cinderella, it's this Cinderella was sort of trapped in this space where her stepmother said, like, you can go to the ball as soon as you finish your chores. And
ah,
for me, that was sort
yes.
of this, I felt like my true self was trapped. Like you can create, but only and
Ah,
like only once you've finished your to-do lists,
mm,
only once you've gotten these ministry tasks done, which is just a lie, and I
yeah.
think was really keeping me bound from
Mm,
becoming and living into my truest self.
mm,
And the journey's not
mm,
done, even these
mm,
days, right now, I'm still relearning, like, oh yes, like even having released the book and sharing it with others, there's a lot of external things that come with that. But how do I return to that artist self and the true self to be abiding in Jesus and letting everything I do overflow from that place?
mm. That's beautiful. So, yeah, talk about more about abiding, like
Mm,
what it is. What does it look like in your life as you're moving? I mean, to me, there's a lot of returning in it. Like
mhm, mhm,
I have that sense of connection. I'm living from that place of abiding, maybe creating first, doing whatever that looks like for me. And then I get involved in life and I forget and I return. I'm just curious what that, if there's a rhythm to that for you, like what does that
Hmm.
look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the word abide in the Greek is meno, which is has many different nuances, which I find fascinating. It means to return, to remain, to dwell, to not
Mm,
depart, to stay as one is. And all of these connotations have this sense of home and belonging and
mm,
safety and
yeah,
not
beautiful.
trying to be something other than you are and not leaving from who you are, but staying
Mm,
present with God as you are. And for
mm,
me, I think I've also recognized that, for the branch abiding in the vine, it looks different in every season. And that
mm,
abiding in a dormancy season might look like a lot of time dwelling in silence and solitude
mm,
and waiting, and abiding looks like remaining present with God in the midst of suffering or lament
mm.
or loss, and to not try to leave that place, but to remain and dwell and abide with
Oh,
God in
yes.
it.
Hmm, yeah.
Staying present. And what was fascinating to me when I learned about the vine's energy shifts is that in right after the harvest, the energy shifts down into the roots, and the energy is stored there all winter until bud break. And I just think about where our energy shifts in all the seasons of
Mm,
our own lives, and that actually paying attention to the energy shifting into the roots is also a way of saying, like, okay, this time of abiding is abiding with Christ in my roots, of the roots of the vine
mm,
that is hidden. It's inner,
mm,
unseen work. It is the character formation and spiritual formation work that happens in the hidden place of the soul and the heart.
mm,
But then an abiding season in pruning, which is just before bud rake, maybe, okay, like I'm choosing to surrender the things that you
mm,
are wanting to cut away. And I'm choosing to hold and to cling on to you more than these branches, right? And more than
mm,
my expectations of what I want to see
mm,
happen,
mm,
your things that are growing, but trusting in you as the source of all of life. And abiding in
yeah.
a bud break season, maybe saying, okay, like the energy is now shifting from the roots to the branches. And so I can abide with God in seasons of growth and expansiveness where more of the activity is external and more of the
Mm,
things that are happening are in community. And what does it look like to abide in Christ in the context of my fellow branches in
mm,
community where I'm giving and receiving and letting the life of Christ overflow
mm,
into love for my brothers and sisters,
yeah.
and then letting that cultivate and grow, and allowing the creative life to overflow in that in ways that then ripen fruit. And
Mm,
to abide in Christ in a harvest season might be pouring myself out on behalf of my neighbor, and
mm,
offering myself in love to the world and to those who are suffering or experiencing injustice, and that there's ways of abiding in Christ in seasons like those too, and that it looks different in each one.
mm,
That I might,
mm,
in a dormancy season, have a lot slower of a pace and
mm.
rest and be more alone and withdrawn. And in a
Yeah.
harvest season, I'm still abiding, but I'm participating in the joy of the harvest with God and
Mm,
allowing the joy of that love that He's channeled from my roots through the branches to the fruit to be an expression of that love in the world.
mm. That's beautiful. And I think that's really helpful because I know I hear from people a lot this one sort of meditative view of abiding. Like it's
Mm.
a quiet, sort of more internalized, introverted, sort of meditative, maybe kind of place. But you're offering this picture that that is changing, that's going to look different at different times. And my hunch is that helps more people find a place in it,
Mm-hmm.
a
Mm-hmm.
place they can relate to it.
Yeah,
So that's
that's right.
really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have a hunch there was some point not that long ago where I decided I was really annoyed with the language around God using people,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
versus you talk about God tending us and not
Mm-hmm.
using us. Um, so I'm just curious. I'd love to hear you sort of speak to that because it connects, right, with this whole thing you're talking about this productivity culture, this is driven. You talk about empire and narcissism and rulers and authorities and powers of this dark world, and it seems so appropriate to the times that we're living in right now.
I guess.
So maybe you could take us there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating because, as I've shadowed my friend Dave in the vineyard, he told me like vine dressing is a lot of work and you have to really love your vines if you're going
Mm,
to do it because it's a lot of work for little return, little gain.
mm,
And he's like, I don't do vine dressing for the money. I do it because I love vines. I love to watch them
mm.
grow. I love to cultivate them. And
Wow.
almost even the sort of contemplative nature in which he beholds the vines, that he gets close, that he
Mm,
feels their leaves to see whether or not they're well watered and is responsive to their needs in giving them what they
mm,
need, right? He's paying attention to signs of health and signs of unhealth. And he's not mad at the vine for being unhealthy. He's not mad at it for not producing fruit one year or struggling, but it says, oh,
yeah.
what can I do
Mm,
to cultivate health? Do I need to add more compost in and invest in the nutrients in the soil that feeds the roots? Do
mm,
I need to take fruit away for a time and let it just focus on growing and healing as opposed to expecting this output? But
mm,
I mean, even in the farming industry, that's not always the case either. I mean, there are sort of the industrial approach to farming really is more of a quantitative expectation, right? More is better.
mm.
I want
Yeah.
more of a harvest. I want numbers and profit, right? And
Yeah.
I think when that is the motivation, then the vine is a tool to be used for that end, as opposed to
Mm,
this beauty to behold and
mm,
to have a relationship with and to be responsive to in
mm,
helping it, empowering it to thrive. And I just think as we look at our world right now, we're often asking, I mean, the culture is asking the question, leaders are asking the question, like, how much more can I get out of this? What's the
mm,
profit of this? What's the return on investment? What's the numerical success? So what's the growth chart? Is it going up and to the right?
mm,
Whereas a good vine dresser would say, more isn't better. We're
mm.
looking to make good wine here,
Wow.
and quality is more important than quantity. And you
Mm,
only get quality if you're after flourishing, because it's a flourishing vine that
mm,
yields a quality wine. There are a lot of, wines out there, and I'm new to the wine world, so I don't profess to be an expert, but I do understand that there's, a certain industry in the wine industry where it's you want as much wine output as possible and you want it
mm,
to taste the same across the board. Whereas an organic approach would say, I want the most unique and authentic expression of this vine, and
mm,
I want quality, and I want it to taste different and unique, and that the fruit that is after is not, this massive mass produced thing, but is this overflow and a genuine reflection of the uniqueness of that vine. And I just
mm,
think in an empire approach, in a productivity driven approach, you can't do that because you have to
mm.
scale. You're always scaling for
Yeah.
more as opposed to seeing actually this is more about what's the quality here and how can I relationally respond to this vine to help it flourish at its best, and that it
Mm,
could offer the most unique and beautiful expression of itself, and that God sees himself as part of that process,
mm.
and that we just have to surrender to his cultivation and trust that he's cultivating us in love.
Yes, that's beautiful. It's
Hmm.
beautiful and so helpful, I think, in this particular time that we're living in. This has been amazing. I have one last question.
Sure.
Um, and I'm just wondering, in this time that we're in right now, knowing that we're each experiencing it individually and differently, but are there particular practices that you find yourself turning to that you're finding helpful?
Hmm. Well, a few things. I think one, returning to creation and my body.
Mm,
I think paying attention to how creation is designed to flourish in the
mm,
seasons,
mm,
and getting out into creation and nature
mm,
and grounding myself in that
mm,
helps center and anchor me for the work ahead, and to recognize that the beauty of God's design is so reflected in creation that if I just pay attention to what it's
mm,
doing, to how God is working through creation, it gives me a model for how to live, which is
mm,
part of why I wrote the book, because it just taught me a different way to see the world and myself. And even things like, the reciprocity in creation, that there's
mm,
mutual flourishing between different plants and
mm,
animals, and that
mm.
we were designed to give and we were designed to receive, and that not all of creation is the same. And so
Mm,
leaning into the unique diversity, and how actually things like biodiversity in the ecosystem is a good thing. Like it's a
mm.
thing that causes flourishing and quality.
Yeah,
And here we
yes.
live in a world where it's way more efficient and safer to create a monoculture and
Mm,
just to churn and burn, and just to produce, and that diversity is seen as a threat as opposed to the very nutrients that form
mm,
life and quality and fruit, and that we actually can't bear fruit without diversity on the ecosystem. Like, it's not
mm,
possible. Even if you think
mm.
about just pollination, and how pollination is what sets the
Yeah.
fruit, it's the different parts coming together. And so I think, yeah, I think for me, and for recommending for any of your watchers or listeners, just in this time, keep grounding yourself in your body and in creation, and paying attention to what creation is teaching you about how to flourish
Mm,
and how to be present in this time, and to
mm.
not push or force. And somebody told me once, you can't dismantle the empire using the tools of the empire.
Ah,
You
yes.
know, you have to come
Yes.
up with some different tools.
Yes.
And so that's what I would say.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Mm.
Thank you so much. I feel like there's a couple more hours of conversation to have. So maybe we'll do this again, but
Uh,
I'm just thrilled for people to know you and to know your book. You have a copy there, right? Do you want to hold it
I
up for
do,
folks?
yes.
And we're gonna um, send them to go buy that so they can dive deeper. And if people want to connect with you, Betty, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, you can connect with me on my website, bettydickinson.com, or if you're specifically looking to dive deeper into the art of winemaking, theartofvinemaking.com. There's a ton of resources with the book, including online courses and retreats and guided journeys to really help live this out. Because this is not a thing you read and then you go change your whole
Yeah,
worldview and approach. It does take some time and intentionality, and so I've been seeking to resource people in that way, and you can find out about those on that website, theartofvinemaking.com.
that's awesome. Thank you so much for all you're doing to help us live
Mm.
a life of flourishing,
Yes, absolutely.
living more rooted and grounded. I'm really grateful for this time with you today.
Oh, thank you, Susan, for having me.
Oh, thank you, Betty. And thanks to all of you for joining us. We bless you today to live more deeply rooted.